The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the old city hall, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the world beyond. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wood and flickering yellow light from a chandelier that had seen better days. I stood there, my hands trembling, the thin fabric of my white dress clinging to my skin like a shroud. Before me was Julian Pierce, a man I'd never met until this moment, his presence towering and unyielding. His eyes, sharp, icy blue, cut through me as he slid a gold band onto my finger. It felt like a shackle, cold and heavy, sealing a deal I hadn't agreed to. My father had signed the contract. $5 million to erase a lifetime of bad bets and broken promises. And I was the collateral. I could still hear his voice from last night, slurred and desperate. Clara, it's the only way. $5 million from a billionaire who owned half the city's skyline, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms and whispered fear in back alleys. Julian Pierce. I studied him now, his black suit tailored to perfection, the faint trace of cedarwood cologne lingering in the air, his voice a low rumble that commanded silence. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. "Repeat after me," the officiant said, his words mechanical, as if he'd married off 100 unwilling brides before me. I barely heard him. My gaze drifted to the corner of the room where my mother stood, her frail frame hunched against the wall. She clutched an old handkerchief, the one she'd embroidered with daisies when I was a child, her eyes red and swollen. "You have to do this for your father, for me," she'd pleaded earlier, her voice cracking like brittle glass. I hated my father for his weakness, for dragging us into this mess. But my mother, her quiet strength, her years of stitching, our lives together with nothing but threadbare hope. I couldn't hate her. I loved her too much. And that love was a chain tighter than any ring. "Do you, Clara Evans, take this man?" The words blurred into the rain's roar. I wanted to scream, to run, to tear the dress off and disappear into the storm, but I didn't. I said the words, my voice hollow, a stranger's echo in my own throat. "I do." Julian's response was curt, a single nod, as if this were just another business transaction. Maybe it was. To him, I was a line item on a ledger, a debt paid in flesh instead of cash. The ceremony ended as abruptly as it began. No applause, no music, just the scrape of the officiant's pen on paper and the thud of my heart against my ribs. Julian turned to me, his expression unreadable, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in those cold eyes. Regret? Triumph? I couldn't tell. "Let's go," he said, his tone clipped, already moving toward the door. I didn't follow right away. My feet felt rooted to the worn wooden floor, every step a betrayal of the life I'd known. Outside, the rain hit me like a slap, soaking through the dress in seconds. I shivered, my arms wrapping around myself as the wind howled past. The black limo gleamed under the streetlights, its engine purring like a beast waiting to devour me. My mother hurried over, her coat too thin for the weather, and pressed the handkerchief into my hand. "Clara," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you're stronger than you know." Her fingers brushed mine, cold and fragile, and I wanted to pull her into my arms, to tell her I'd fix this somehow. But before I could, Julian was there, his shadow falling over us. He shrugged off his overcoat and draped it over my shoulders without a word. The weight of it startled me, warm, expensive, smelling faintly of him. For a split second I felt a flicker of something, gratitude maybe, but it drowned in the tide of my anger. I didn't want his pity, his protection, his anything. "I don't need you," I snapped, shoving the coat off me. It fell to the wet pavement with a soft thud, And I met his gaze, defiant, daring him to argue. He didn't. He just stared, his jaw tightening, those blue eyes narrowing like a predator, sizing up prey. My mother's gasp cut through the silence, her hand flying to her mouth, and I saw the hurt in her face, the fear that I'd just made an enemy of the man who held our lives in his hands. "Get in the car," Julian said, his voice low but edged with steel. It wasn't a request. I hesitated, my breath fogging in the cold air, then turned to my mother one last time. Her eyes locked with mine, pleading, and I felt the weight of her sacrifice crash over me. She'd given up everything, her pride, her dreams, to keep us, afloat after my father's failures. This was her last stand, her final plea to save him, to save us. I couldn't let her down, not when she'd carried me this far. I stepped toward the limo, the rain plastering my hair to my face, and slid into the leather seat. The door slammed shut behind me, a sound as final as a judge's gavel. Julian climbed in beside me, his presence filling the space, suffocating. The driver pulled away, and through the tinted window, I watched my mother shrink into the distance, a lone figure under the flickering streetlight, clutching that daisy-stitched handkerchief like a lifeline. I didn't look at Julian. I couldn't. My hands twisted in my lap, the ring biting into my skin, a constant reminder of the cage I'd just walked into. I hated him, his wealth, his control, the way he'd bought me like a piece of property. But beneath that hate, something else stirred, something I couldn't name. Fear, yes, but also a quiet, stubborn resolve. If this was my prison, I'd find a way to survive it. For my mother. For myself. The rain kept falling, a curtain between me and the life I'd left behind. And as the limo sped into the night, I wondered what kind of man I'd just bound myself to, and what price I'd pay to keep my family whole. The limo's engine hummed beneath me as we wound along the coastal road, the rain a gray veil against the tinted windows. I pressed my forehead to the glass, watching the ocean churn below, its waves crashing against jagged cliffs like a mirror to the storm inside me. Julian sat beside me, silent, his presence a wall I couldn't breach. The ring on my finger felt heavier with every mile, a cold reminder of the life I'd been forced into. I didn't know where we were going, only that it was away from my mother, from the crumbling house I'd called home, from everything I'd ever known. When the car slowed, I lifted my eyes. A mansion loomed ahead, perched on the edge of the cliff, like a sentinel guarding secrets. Its stone walls glowed faintly under the storm's dim light, windows tall and dark, framed by crimson velvet curtains that swayed like blood in the wind. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out, the salty air biting my skin. Julian was already moving toward the entrance, his strides long and purposeful, as if I were an afterthought. I followed, my soaked dress dragging behind me, my shoes squelching on the gravel path. Inside, the air was warm but heavy, scented with aged oak and a hint of something floral. Roses, maybe, though I saw no flowers. The foyer stretched into shadows. A grand staircase spiraling upward, its banister polished to a gleam. "This is your home now," Julian said, his voice cutting through the stillness. He didn't look at me, just gestured to a maid who appeared, from nowhere, her gray uniform crisp and her face blank. "Take her to her room," he ordered, then disappeared down a hallway, leaving me with the echo of his footsteps. The maid led me upstairs, her silence unnerving. My room, his room for me, was a cavern of luxury I couldn't fathom. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in silk the color of midnight. Crimson curtains framed a window overlooking the raging sea, and a mahogany dresser stood against. One wall, its surface bare except for a single silver hairbrush. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt like a cage, every detail chosen by him, not me. I ran my fingers over the brush, imagining my mother's old comb, chipped and worn, the one she'd used to tame my hair as a child. This wasn't home. This was his world, and I was a prisoner in it. He'd left rules, too. The maid handed me a note, typed, impersonal, his signature a slashing scrawl at the bottom. Dinner at 7. Wear the dress in the closet. Stay out of the west wing. I crumpled it in my fist, my nails digging into my palm. Who did he think he was, dictating my every move? I tore open the closet, expecting some gaudy gown, but found a simple navy dress, elegant, understated, the kind I might have chosen myself. It unnerved me more than if it had been extravagant. Did he know me, or was this just another game? I didn't wear it. Not yet. Instead, I paced the room, my wet clothes clinging to me, my mind racing. I couldn't sit still, couldn't let him win so easily. The dresser drawers beckoned, and I rummaged through them, desperate for something, anything, that wasn't his. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of silk scarves, I found it. A faded photograph. A young woman stared back at me, her face so like mine it stole my breath. Same dark hair, same sharp cheekbones, same wary eyes. On the back, in smudged ink, Lily, 2005. My heart thudded. Who was she? Why was she here? The library was my next stop. I slipped out, barefoot, the hardwood cool against my soles. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with portraits of stern men in suits, their eyes following me. The library door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing walls of books and a desk littered with papers. Julian stood there, his back to me, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He didn't turn, but I knew he heard me. "Who's Lily?" I demanded, holding up the photo, my voice sharper than I'd intended. He stiffened, then faced me, his expression a mask of control. "My sister," he said, each word deliberate. "And I married you to protect what's left of her memory." His eyes flicked to the photo, then back to me, and for a moment I saw something raw beneath the ice. Pain, maybe, or guilt. "Don't dig into my past, Clara. You won't like what you find." His tone was a warning, but it only fueled me. Then, "Why me?" I pressed, stepping closer. "Why not some heiress, some trophy? What do you want from me?" He set the glass down, the clink loud in the quiet, and crossed his arms. "You'll understand in time," he said, evasive, maddening. I wanted to scream, to shake him until the truth spilled out, but I held back. My mother's voice echoed, in my head. Don't trust anyone in this world. She'd meant men like him. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. His overcoat hung on a rack, damp from the rain, and I saw it, the sleeve crumpled where he'd draped it over me. Without thinking, I reached out, smoothed it flat, and laid it neatly across a chair. It was a small thing, a reflex from years of tidying after my father, but it felt like defiance, a claim to my own space in his domain. He watched me, silent, his gaze unreadable. Back in my room, I sank onto the bed, the photo still clutched, in my hand. Lily's face haunted me, a ghost I didn't know but couldn't escape. Julian's words gnawed at me, to protect what's left of her memory. What did that mean? Was I a stand-in? A replacement for a woman I'd never met? I hated him for it, for trapping me here, for making me question everything. But as I traced the edges of the photo, a flicker of curiosity sparked beneath my anger. If he was hiding something, I'd find it. Not for him, for me, for the honor of the life I'd been forced to leave behind. The sea roared outside, a wild song of freedom I couldn't reach. But I'd survived this cliffside prison. I had to. The mansion felt alive at night, its walls creaking under the weight of the storm, the sea's endless roar seeping through the cracks. I couldn't sleep. The silk sheets twisted around me, too smooth, too foreign, a stark contrast to the threadbare blanket I'd shared with my mother on cold nights. Her face haunted me, those tired eyes, the way she'd pressed that daisy-stitched handkerchief into my hand like a piece of her soul. I needed air, needed to escape the suffocating luxury of this room Julian had locked me into. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, and crept to the balcony door. The latch clicked softly as I pushed it open, and a gust of wind hit me, carrying the sharp tang of salt and rain. The moon hung low, its light fractured by clouds, casting a silver glow over the cliff's edge. I stepped out, my nightgown fluttering, and gripped the wet railing. The sea stretched before me, wild and untamed, a freedom I could see but not touch. I closed my eyes, picturing my mother brewing tea in our cramped kitchen, her hands steady despite everything. "You're stronger than you know," she'd said. I wasn't so sure. A shadow moved below, pulling me from my thoughts. I leaned over the railing, squinting through the drizzle. Julian stood there, alone on the cliffside path, his dark coat billowing like a cape. He held something small, glinting in the moonlight, a necklace maybe. His head was bowed, his shoulders hunched, a posture so unlike the man who'd commanded my life with a single nod. I should have turned back, left him to his ghosts, but that photo of Lily burned in my mind. I needed answers. I grabbed a shawl from the chair, thin, useless, against the cold, but it was something, and hurried downstairs. The mansion was a maze of shadows, the air thick with the scent of old books and wax polish. I slipped through the foyer, past the portraits with their judging eyes, and out the back door. The rain had softened to a mist, slicking the stone path under my feet. Julian didn't hear me approach, not until I was close enough to see the silver chain dangling from his hand, a tiny pendant catching the light. "Who are you, really?" I shouted, my voice raw, cutting through the wind. He turned sharply, his face a mask of surprise that quickly hardened. The necklace vanished into his fist, but not before I saw the pain flicker in his eyes. Deep, unguarded, a crack in his armor. "I told you not to dig," he said, his tone low, a warning wrapped in velvet. I stepped closer, the mist beating on my skin. "You don't get to tell me what to do. Not after you bought me like some trinket. Who's Lily? Why am I here?" He stared at me, the silence stretching taut between us, broken only by the distant crash of waves. Then, slowly, he opened his hand, revealing the necklace, a delicate silver chain with a locket, engraved with a single L. "She was my sister," he said, his voice rough, like it hurt to speak. "Lily died 10 years ago. A car accident. Vincent Russo. He was my rival, my mistake. Rigged it to punish me. I wasn't there to save her." He looked away, out at the sea, and I saw the weight he carried, a burden heavier than this mansion's stone. I wanted to hate him, to throw his words back in his face, but something in his tone stopped me. "And me?" I pressed, my voice trembling. "Why me?" He met my gaze, his eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "You look like her, too much like her. I saw you in that photo your father sent, and I thought I could protect what was left of her through you, a second chance." His admission hit me like a wave, cold and overwhelming. "I'm not her," I snapped, my hands clenching into fists. "I'm not some ghost you can dress up and control." "I know," he said, softer now, almost broken. "But I can't lose you too." Before I could react, he stepped forward and grabbed my hand, his grip tight, desperate. The rain picked up, soaking us both, and he pulled me closer, out of the mist and into the downpour. "You don't get to leave me," he said, his voice cracking, rain streaming down his face. I should have yanked away, should have run back to the safety of my cage, but I didn't. His touch burned through the cold, and for the first time I saw him. Not the billionaire, not the captor, but a man drowning in regret. My mind spun. I thought of my mother, her warnings about men like him, her sacrifices to shield me from a world she couldn't fight. I thought of my father, weak and selfish, trading me for his debts. And here was Julian, trading me for his guilt. "You don't own me," I whispered, but my hand stayed in his, the rain blurring the line between us. I hated him, yes, but I felt it, a thread of something else, fragile and unbidden, weaving through my anger. Pity? Understanding? I couldn't tell. He let go first, stepping back, the necklace still clutched in his hand. "Go inside," he said, his voice steady again, the mask slipping back into place. I didn't move, not right away. I stood there, drenched, my shawl plastered to my shoulders, watching him turn back to the sea. The moonlight caught his profile, sharp and solitary, and I wondered what it cost him to carry that locket every night. Back in my room, I sank onto the bed, my wet hair dripping onto the silk. Lily's face flashed in my mind, her eyes so like mine, and Julian's words echoed. A second chance. I didn't want to be his redemption, but I couldn't unsee the man beneath the control, the one who stood alone in the rain, mourning a sister he'd failed. For my mother's sake, for my own, I'd find the truth. The sea sang its wild song, outside, and I vowed to endure, to unravel this man who'd bound me to his past. The morning after the rain-soaked confrontation on the cliff, the mansion felt different. Less like a prison, more like a puzzle I had to solve. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off the chandelier in Julian's office, where I found myself standing, uninvited. The room was a fortress of wealth, polished mahogany desk, leather chairs, the faint bitterness of coffee lingering from a cup he'd left behind. I hadn't slept, not really. Lily's face, Julian's broken voice, the weight of that locket kept me awake, churning through my thoughts like the sea outside. I shouldn't have been there. He'd told me to stay out of his spaces, but after last night, his rules felt less like chains and more like a dare. I needed to know more. Not just about Lily, but about why I was here, why my family's ruin had landed me in his hands. The desk drawers were locked, but a safe sat in the corner, its steel door slightly ajar, as if he'd been interrupted. My fingers hesitated over the handle, my mother's warning ringing in my ears. Don't trust anyone in this world. But trust wasn't the point anymore. Survival was. Inside, I found a stack of papers, contracts, deeds, and then, buried beneath them, an envelope with no name. I tore it open, my breath catching as I read the scrawled words, "She'll pay the price for Lily. You can't hide her forever." The signature was a jagged VR, Vincent Russo, the man Julian had blamed for his sister's death. My hands shook, the paper crinkling in my grip. This wasn't just about guilt or memory. This was a threat, and I was the target. The phone on the desk buzzed, startling me. I dropped the letter and froze as Julian's voice crackled through the speaker, mid-conversation. "Vincent knows about her. Double the security." My stomach twisted. He wasn't in the room, but he was close. Too close. I shoved the letter back into the safe and bolted, my heart pounding as I raced to my room. I needed my mother, needed her voice to ground me in this spiraling nightmare. I dialed her number, pacing the silk rug, the sea's distant roar a faint hum through the window. She answered on the third ring, her voice thin and weary. "Clara, are you okay?" I didn't waste time. "Mom, tell me the truth. Why does Dad owe Vincent Russo? What did he do?" There was a long pause, the kind that carries years of secrets, and then she broke. "Your father worked for him years ago," she said, her words trembling. "Vincent lent him money to save me, cancer treatments when we had nothing. But your dad, he gambled it away, lost everything. I hid it from you, Clara, so you wouldn't hate him." I sank onto the bed, the phone pressed to my ear, tears stinging my eyes. "You should have told me," I whispered. "I could have helped." Her sob cut through me, sharp and raw. "I wanted you to have a life, not our mistakes." I clutched the receiver tighter, picturing her hands, rough from years of sewing, cooking, holding us together. She'd sacrificed her pride for me, just as I'd sacrificed mine for her. We were mirrors, trapped in the same cycle of love and ruin. Footsteps echoed in the hall, heavy and deliberate. I hung up, wiping my face as Julian appeared in the doorway, his suit pristine, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low, suspicion threading through it. I stood, my chin lifting despite the tremor in my legs. "Why did you pull me into this? Vincent Russo. He's after me, isn't he?" I didn't wait for him to deny it. "I found the letter. He wants me to pay for Lily." His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek. He stepped closer, the scent of cedarwood and coffee filling the space between us. "I didn't want you to know," he said, his tone clipped. But there was something else. Regret, maybe. Or fear. "Not yet." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You don't get to decide that. You dragged me into your war, Julian. Why?" He looked away, his hands curling into fists, then back at me, his eyes dark with a truth he couldn't hide. "Because I couldn't save her. And I won't let him take you too." The words landed like a punch, stealing my breath. I wanted to hate him, to scream that I wasn't his sister, his redemption, but the crack in his voice held me back. He wasn't just the cold billionaire anymore. He was a man haunted, and I was his shield. "You should have told me," I said, echoing my words to my mother. "I deserve to know what I'm fighting for." He didn't answer, just watched me. The silence thick with unspoken things. I turned to the dresser, my hands trembling as I pulled out a teapot I'd found in the kitchen earlier. A small chipped thing, out of place in this mansion. I filled it with water from the sink, set it on a tray and poured a cup, the steam curling up like a fragile peace offering. "Sit," I said, my voice steady despite everything. He hesitated, then took the chair across from me, the cup untouched between us. Outside, a car's headlights flashed through the curtains, slow and deliberate, circling the estate. My pulse spiked, and Julian's hand shot out, gripping my wrist. "Stay here," he said, his voice hard again, but his touch was warm, protective. "I won't let him hurt you." I pulled free, my eyes locked on his. "I'm not helpless," I said, and for the first time I believed it. The headlights faded, but the threat lingered, a shadow creeping closer. I sipped the tea, its warmth grounding me, and thought of my mother, of her strength, her secrets. Julian might have bought me, but he didn't own me. I'd protect her, protect myself, even if it meant facing the darkness he'd brought into my life. The storm came that night, fiercer than any before, as if the sky itself had turned against us. Rain lashed the mansion's windows, the wind howling like a trapped animal, rattling the glass in its frames. I stood in the foyer, the chipped teapot still warm in my hands from earlier, its steam long gone. Julian had left me with his promise. I won't let him hurt you. But the headlights I'd seen circling the estate haunted me. Vincent Russo wasn't a ghost in a letter anymore. He was real, and he was close. I should have stayed in my room, locked the door, waited for Julian to handle it. But the weight of my mother's confession, her illness, my father's betrayal, burned in my chest. I wasn't a pawn to be protected. I was done waiting. I set the teapot on a side table, its clink swallowed by the storm, and grabbed a fireplace poker from the hearth. It was cold, heavy, a makeshift weapon for a fight I didn't want but couldn't avoid. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the mansion into darkness. Thunder roared, shaking the walls, and I gripped the poker tighter, my pulse racing. A crash echoed from the back, glass shattering, sharp and final. I froze, my breath shallow, then crept toward the sound, the hardwood slick under my bare feet. The kitchen door hung open, rain pouring in, shards of a broken window glinting on the tile. A figure stepped through, tall and shadowed, his coat dripping like ink onto the floor. "Clara Evans," he said, his voice a low growl, thick with menace. Vincent Russo. I'd never seen him, but I knew. Those hard eyes, that cruel twist of a smile. He was older than Julian, his face lined with years of bitterness, a scar cutting across his brow. Julian's little stand-in. "You're prettier than Lily, I'll give him that." He laughed, a sound that chilled me more than the storm. "Get out," I said, raising the poker, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. He stepped closer, unbothered, his boots crunching glass. "Oh, I'm not leaving without you. Julian chose money over family once. Let's see how he likes losing it all again." Before I could swing, he lunged, his hand clamping around my wrist, twisting until the poker clattered to the floor. I kicked, clawed, anything to break free, but he was stronger, dragging me toward the door. Panic surged, but so did something else. My mother's face, her rough hands sewing late into the night, her quiet strength keeping us alive. I wouldn't let her down. I grabbed a shard of glass from the floor, ignoring the sting as it sliced my palm, and drove it into his arm. He cursed, loosening his grip, and I stumbled back, blood dripping onto the tile. "You little," he snarled, lunging again, but I ducked, scrambling for the poker. The front door burst open, and Julian charged in, soaked and wild-eyed, a gun in his hand. "Let her go," he shouted, his voice raw, cutting through the chaos. Vincent spun, pulling a knife from his coat, and smirked. "Too late, Pierce. You should have stayed out of my way." He grabbed me again, the blade pressing cold against my throat. I froze, my heart hammering, but I locked eyes with Julian, his fear, his fury, a mirror to my own. "Vincent, don't," Julian said, his gun steady, but his voice cracked. "This isn't about her." Vincent laughed, pressing the knife, harder. A thin line of pain blooming on my skin. "Oh, it's all about her now. You think you can replace Lily? Here's the truth you never knew. She was pregnant. My kid. You let her die, and I lost everything." The words hit like thunder. Louder than the storm, Julian's face crumpled, the gun wavering in his hand. "What?" he whispered, disbelief shattering his control. "You're lying." Vincent's grin widened, vicious. "She didn't tell you. Wanted to run away with me, but you were too busy building your empire. Now you'll watch this one bleed." I didn't wait for Julian to recover. My mother's strength surged through me, her years of silent endurance. I stomped on Vincent's foot, hard, and twisted free as he yelped, the knife clattering away. Julian snapped out of his shock, firing a shot that grazed Vincent's shoulder. He roared, charging Julian, and they crashed to the floor, a tangle of fists and blood. I grabbed the poker, my hand slick with rain and blood, and swung it at Vincent's back. He grunted, staggering, giving Julian the chance to pin him down. "Enough!" Julian shouted, his knee on Vincent's chest, the gun pressed to his temple. Vincent glared up, panting, but the fight drained from him, his scar stark against his pale face. Julian didn't shoot. He stood, dragging Vincent up, and shoved him toward the door. "Get out. Next time I won't miss." Vincent stumbled into the rain, clutching his shoulder, his laughter fading into the wind. The silence that followed was deafening, broken, only by the drip of water from the broken window. Julian turned to me, his chest heaving, blood streaking his face from a cut above his eye. "Clara," he started, but I cut him off, dropping the poker. "You didn't know," I said, my voice hoarse. "About Lily, about the baby." He shook his head, his eyes glistening, a man unmoored. "I didn't, I swear." I stepped closer, the storm raging outside, and pressed my hand to his arm, steadying him as he'd tried to steady me. Blood stained my fingers, but I didn't pull away. "We're not done," I said, firm, resolute. "But I'm not running." He nodded, a silent vow, and for the first time, I saw him as more than my captor, a man broken by the family he'd lost, fighting to save the one he'd found. The rain pounded on, but I stood taller, my mother's courage in my veins. Vincent was gone for now, but the war wasn't over, and I'd fight it. For her. For me. For us. The storm had passed, leaving the mansion bruised and silent, its broken window gaping like a wound. I stood in the living room, the air heavy with the scent of wet wood and antiseptic, my hands stained with Julian's blood. He sat on the leather couch, his shirt torn open where I'd pressed a towel to the cut above his eye. The fight with Vincent had left us both battered, him physically, me somewhere deeper, where the truth about Lily and her unborn child still echoed, sharp and unrelenting. I moved to the fireplace, its embers glowing faintly, and grabbed a first aid kit from the mantel. My fingers trembled as I opened it, pulling out gauze and tape, the mundane task grounding me in the chaos. Julian watched, his breath uneven, his face pale under the flickering light. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice rough, almost a plea. I didn't look at him, just kept working, pressing the gauze to his wound. "Someone has to," I replied, sharp but steady. "And I'm not leaving you to bleed out." His hand caught mine, stopping me mid-motion, warm against my cold skin. "Clara, I didn't know," he said, the words spilling out, raw and desperate. "About Lily. About the baby. I swear." His eyes, those icy blue depths I'd once feared, were wet, glistening with a grief I hadn't seen before. I pulled my hand back, not because I didn't believe him, but because I needed space to breathe, to think. "You abandoned her," I said, my voice low, accusing. "You chose your empire over your family." He flinched, the towel slipping as he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I did," he admitted, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I was young, arrogant, thought I could fix everything with money. Lily begged me to stay, to leave the deals and the rivalries. But I didn't listen. When she died, I told myself it was Vincent's fault, his sabotage, his revenge. But it was mine, too." His voice broke, a crack that split the silence. And I saw him then, a man stripped bare, not by the fight, but by the weight of his own failures. I turned away, my chest tight, and walked to the kitchen. The broken window let in a damp breeze, the floor still littered with glass. I grabbed the coffee pot, another chipped relic I'd claimed from this sterile mansion, and filled it with water, my hands moving on autopilot. The machine hissed to life, the bitter aroma cutting through the antiseptic sting. I poured 2 cups, the steam curling up like a fragile truce, and carried one back to him. "Drink," I said, setting it on the table beside him. He took it, his fingers brushing mine, a fleeting touch that felt heavier than it should. I sat across from him, cradling my own cup, the warmth seeping into my palms. "My father did the same," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Chose money over us. Gambled away everything. My mother's treatment, our home. She hid it from me. Thought I'd hate him if I knew. And I do, sometimes. But I love her more." My voice wavered, memories of her rough hands stitching, late into the night flooding back. We're not so different, you and me. Victims of men who thought wealth could fix their messes. Julian stared into his coffee, the steam fogging his face. "I never meant to make you a victim," he said, quiet, almost lost. "When I saw your photo, I thought I could save you. Save her through you. But you're not her, Clara. You're stronger than she ever was." His words hit me, a jolt that stirred something deep. Anger? Yes. But also a flicker of pride. I wasn't Lily, pregnant and pleading. I was me, scarred, but standing. The phone rang, shrill and sudden, shattering the moment. I grabbed it from the table, my heart sinking as a reporter's voice crackled through. "Mrs. Pierce, we've got reports of an attack at the estate. Care to comment?" I slammed it down, my hands shaking. "They know," I said, turning to Julian. "The press, they'll spin this into whatever sells." He stood, wincing as he pressed the towel back to his eye. "Let them," he said, his tone hardening. "I'll handle it." "No," I snapped, stepping in front of him. "We handle it. Together. I'm not some damsel you lock away while you play hero." He froze, surprise flashing across his face, then nodded, a faint curve to his lips, the first hint of a smile I'd seen. "Together," he agreed, and the word felt like a pact, fragile but real. I walked to the window, the glass crunching under my feet, and peered out. The storm had left the cliffside battered, the sea calmer now, reflecting the first gray light of dawn. My mind raced. Vincent's revelation, Lily's unborn child, my mother's hidden pain. I'd fought for her tonight, for the family she'd held together alone. But Julian's fight was mine now too. Not because he'd bought me, but because I'd chosen it. I turned back to him, his silhouette stark, against the firelight. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice firm, a demand, not a request. "No more secrets." He met my gaze, the coffee cup still in his hand, untouched, and nodded again. "Everything," he promised, and I felt the shift, control slipping. From his grasp to mine, a balance born from the wreckage of the night. The press would come, the shadows would deepen, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd faced Vincent, faced the truth, and I'd face whatever came next. For my mother, for the honor she'd taught me, and maybe, just maybe, for the man sitting across from me, broken but not beyond repair. The dawn broke quietly, the storm's fury spent, leaving the mansion bathed in a soft gray light. I stood in the kitchen, sweeping glass from the floor, the broom's bristles scraping against the tile, a small grounding sound amid the chaos of the night. Julian had gone upstairs to clean his wounds, but his promise, everything, hung in the air, a tether pulling me toward something I couldn't yet name. My hand ached where the glass shard had cut it, a dull reminder of Vincent's attack, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest, for my mother, for the truths we'd both carried too long. I needed her here. I dialed her number, the phone cool against my ear, and she answered quickly, her voice tight with worry. "Clara, what's happened? I saw the news. Some fight at the estate. I took a breath, steadying myself. I'm okay, Mom, but I need you to come. Now. There's too much I can't explain over the phone. She hesitated, then said, I'll be there. Her tone firm. The mother who'd stitched our lives together with nothing but grit. She arrived an hour later, her old coat damp from the lingering mist, her eyes wide as she stepped into the foyer. I ran to her, throwing my arms around her, and felt her tremble. Fragile, but unyielding, like the daisies on her handkerchief. Clara, she whispered, pulling back to search my face. What's going on? Before I could answer, Julian appeared at the top of the stairs, his shirt fresh but his face still marked by the fight. Bruised, vulnerable. I led her to the living room, the fire long dead, the air cool and still. Julian followed, silent, his presence a shadow I couldn't shake. Mom, I started, sitting beside her on the couch. Tell me everything. About Dad, Vincent, all of it. No more hiding. She clutched her hands together, her knuckles white, and glanced at Julian, then back at me. I didn't want you to know, she said, her voice breaking. Your father worked for Vincent. Odd jobs, dirty money. When I got sick, cancer eating me alive, he borrowed from him to pay for treatments, but he couldn't stop gambling. The debt grew. And Vincent, he never forgave us. Tears welled in her eyes, and I took her hand, her skin rough against mine. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, softer now, not accusing. She squeezed, my fingers, a sob escaping. Because I was ashamed. I thought if I kept it from you, you'd have a chance at something better. Not this. She gestured at the mansion, at Julian, at the wreckage of our lives. Julian stepped forward, his voice low but steady. It's my fault too, he said, meeting her gaze. Vincent came after Clara because of me, because of Lily, because of what I let happen. He pulled the silver locket from his pocket, its chain glinting in the dim light, and handed it to me. This was hers, he said, his eyes on mine. I carried it to remember her, to punish myself. But you're not her, Clara. You're not a ghost I'm trying to save. You're more. I opened the locket, Lily's face staring back. Young, smiling, so like me but not me. My throat tightened, but I handed it back. Then stop treating me like her, I said, firm but not cruel. He nodded, slipping it into his pocket, a weight lifting from his shoulders. I turned to my mother, her tears drying now. I don't hate you, I said, my voice cracking. I hate what Dad did, what this world did to us. But you, I love you. Always. She pulled me into her arms, her warmth a balm I hadn't known I needed, and I felt the pieces of us start to mend, fragile but real. Julian watched, then crossed to the closet, pulling out a clean shirt, a simple cotton one, not his usual tailored perfection. You're hurt, I said, noticing the way he winced. Let me. He hesitated, then sat, letting me unbutton, the blood-streaked one, my fingers brushing his skin as I slipped the new shirt over his shoulders. It was a quiet act, ordinary amid the extraordinary, and it steadied me. Us. I need to go out there, he said, nodding toward the balcony. Face the press, Vincent's mess. I stood, blocking his path. Not alone, I said, my voice resolute. We do this together. He looked at me, really looked, and said, Okay. We stepped onto the balcony, the sky clear now, stars, piercing the darkness over the sea. The air smelled of salt and promise, the cliff's edge a silent witness. He took my hand, tentative, and I didn't pull away. I need you, he said, soft, unguarded, the first time he'd let the mask fall completely. I met his gaze, the bruises on his face stark under the starlight, and felt my own walls crack. "I need you too," I admitted, the words a leap I hadn't planned. My mother joined us, her hand slipping into mine, a chain of 3 against the night. I thought of her sacrifices, of Julian's guilt, of the family we'd lost and the one we were building. Vincent was still out there, the press circling like vultures, but I wasn't afraid. I'd fought for her, for me, and now for him, not because I had to, but because I chose to. The stars glittered above, a map of redemption drawn in light, and I knew we'd face the dawn together. I hugged my mother again, her coat rough against my cheek, and felt her strength flow into me. Julian stood beside us, not apart anymore, and I saw the man he could be. Not the billionaire who'd bought me, but the one who'd fight to keep us whole. The sea whispered below, a song of resilience, and I held on, ready for whatever came next. The first light of dawn crept over the cliff, painting the sea in hues of gold and pink, a quiet beauty after the storm's rage. I stood on the balcony, my mother beside me, her hand warm in mine, the salt air mingling with the faint scent of her old coat. Julian leaned against the railing, his silhouette softened by the sunrise, the bruises on his face fading into shadow. The night had changed us. Vincent's attack, the truths laid bare, the fragile bond we'd forged under the stars. But the world beyond this cliff wouldn't wait, and the hum of approaching cars told me the press had arrived, hungry for a story. I squeezed my mother's hand, feeling the roughness of her skin, the years of labor etched into every line. "Stay here," I said, my voice steady. "Let us handle this." She nodded, her eyes bright with a trust I hadn't seen in years, and stepped back into the living room, the door clicking shut behind her. Julian turned to me, his expression a mix of weariness and resolve. "They'll tear us apart," he said, his voice low, the weight of his empire pressing down. "Vincent's lies, Lily's story, it's all they'll see." "Then we give them the truth," I replied, stepping closer, my chin lifted. "Not their version, ours." He studied me, those blue eyes searching, and I saw the shift. The man who'd once controlled me now looking to me for strength. "All right," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Together." We walked down to the cliff's edge, where the gravel drive curved toward the mansion. A dozen reporters swarmed from their vans, cameras flashing, voices shouting over the gulls circling above. "Mr. Pierce, what happened last night?" "Mrs. Pierce, is it true there was an attack?" "What's your connection to Vincent Russo?" I felt the heat of their gaze, the weight of their words, but I didn't flinch. Julian raised a hand, silencing them, his presence still commanding despite the bloodstains on his shirt. "I'll tell you what happened," he said, his voice cutting through the clamor, clear and firm. "Vincent Russo broke into my home. He threatened my wife. He's a man I trusted once, a man who took my sister from me. Lily Pierce, 10 years ago. I've spent a decade building walls to keep that pain out. But last night, I learned I'd lost more than I knew. She was pregnant. When she died and I didn't save her." His voice cracked, just for a moment, and the cameras zoomed in, but he didn't falter. The reporters murmured, pens scratching, but I stepped forward, my hand finding his. "I'm not here because he bought me," I said, my tone sharp, unwavering. "My father sold me to clear a debt tied to Vincent, to my mother's survival. I hated Julian for it, hated this world of money and power. But last night I fought for him, for us, because family isn't about what you're given, it's what you choose to protect." My voice rose, steady against the wind, and I felt my mother's strength in every word. Julian squeezed my hand, his grip tight, grounding. "I'm done hiding," he continued, facing the cameras. The Pierce name means something. Wealth, yes, but also mistakes. I've made plenty. I'll spend the rest of my life fixing them. Starting with her. He nodded to me, a vow in his eyes, and the reporters erupted, questions flying like shrapnel. He ignored them, turning to me instead. I'll give it up, he said, quieter, just for me. The company, the deals, if that's what it takes to keep you safe. I shook my head, my heart swelling. No, I said, firm. We don't run. We rebuild. Together. He smiled then, a real one, small but bright, and I knew we'd crossed a line. From captivity to partnership, from guilt to purpose. The reporters dispersed eventually, their vans peeling away, leaving us in the sea. Dawn's hush. I led Julian back inside, where my mother waited, her coat draped over a chair, her hands clasped in her lap. She stood as we entered, crossing to me, and took my hands in hers. You saved us, she said, her voice thick, tears brimming. Not just last night. All of it. I'm so proud. Her fingers tightened, a lifeline I'd never let go, and I pulled her close, her warmth a home I'd always carry. Julian watched, then stepped to the fireplace, stoking the embers back to life. The room glowed, soft and steady, and I saw the man he was becoming, not the billionaire who'd bound me, but the one who'd set me free. Clara, he said, turning, his voice gentle. I don't know what's next. Vincent, the fallout. But I know I want you here. Not because I need you, but because I choose you. I crossed to him, my mother's hand still in mine, a chain unbroken. I choose you too, I said, the words a quiet thunder in my chest. Not the mansion, not the money, the man who fought for me. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face, his touch light but sure, and I felt the dawn settle into me, a promise of something new. We stood there, the three of us, as the sun climbed higher, its light spilling over the cliff. The sea murmured below, a song of resilience, and I thought of Lily, not as a ghost, but as a memory we'd honor, not repeat. Honor isn't hiding, I said, more to myself than them. It's fixing what's broken. Julian nodded. My mother smiled, and I knew we'd face tomorrow, whatever it brought, together. The future was uncertain, Vincent's shadow still lurking, the press spinning their tales. But today, we had each other. My mother's quiet courage, Julian's hard-won heart, my own stubborn will. That was enough. The dawn stretched wide, and I held on, ready to rebuild. If you've been swept away by this journey of love, resilience, and redemption, don't forget to hit that like button. It means the world to me. And if you want more stories that tug at your heart and lift your spirit, subscribe now so you never miss an update. Let's keep this adventure going together.